The metallic clang of the one-way bus ticket dropping into the brown paper box was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't the sound of my father's contempt or my sister's cruel laughter that stole my breath. It was the chilling realization that for 27 years, I had been diligently learning to speak a language my family refused to learn. The language of my own potential. This bus ticket, an intentional act of exile disguised as a push towards independence, wasn't a punishment, it was a passport. It was the physical manifestation of my final, irreversible severance from a home that valued performance over authenticity. The sight of it, a flimsy piece of paper dictating a journey from Seattle to Denver, felt like a scene pulled from a classical Greek tragedy, where the hero is cast out, unaware that the journey ahead is the crucible for their true destiny, their predetermined, inevitable future. Yet, unlike the tragic heroes, I was no victim. I was the secret architect of my escape. As I hugged my mother, her soft, trembling frame a fragile barrier against my father's stoic, controlling posture, I didn't see a final goodbye. I saw a temporary separation before a spectacular reveal. My father, Robert Hart, was an emotional autocrat, his every gesture a command, his silence a weapon. His insistence that my passion for cybersecurity was a mere hobby and that I should emulate my perfect younger sister, Maya, was a subtle form of emotional gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation in which a person makes someone else question their own memory, perception, or sanity. The entire Hart family dynamic was a complex, unspoken grammar ruled by Robert's moods, the conditional tense for any hope of approval. If you choose a sensible career, then I will be proud, and the passive voice for my existence. Your achievements are just a phase that will be outgrown. The bus ride itself became a profound lesson in English syntax. I was finally moving from the restrictive dependent clause of my family's narrative, because disappearing was usually the safest option, to the powerful, definitive independent clause of my own life. I am the youngest co-founder of a $40 million tech company. The historical weight of this moment echoes the stories of countless self-made figures, from Benjamin Franklin, who ran away from his apprenticeship to forge his own path, to modern entrepreneurs who trade stability for the uncertainty of innovation. These individuals understood a fundamental truth. Sometimes, the greatest forward momentum comes from a forced or chosen retreat. The bus's engine hummed a low, reassuring thrum, a lullaby, a soft, quiet song intended to help a child fall asleep, that finally drowned out the voices of doubt I had internalized for years. This journey wasn't about the destination of Denver, but about the profound shift in perspective, the philosophical teaching that true self-worth is never externally validated, it is internally declared. My co-founder, Ethan Cole, the only person who treated my mind as a valuable asset rather than a liability, understood this implicitly. His simple text, "Please tell me you didn't stay with them after everything," was the first truly honest question I had received in years, a stark contrast to my father's manipulative directives. The choice to simply reply, "On a bus headed to Denver," was a powerful instance of conciseness, expressing much in few words, proving that true confidence doesn't need to argue or defend, it merely states a fact. As the sun set, painting the sky a bruised purple-orange, I realized that the bus ticket was less an act of expulsion and more a final, required stage direction for the script of my life. Exit Lena, stage left, toward triumph. Every mile deepened the chasm between the small, apologetic girl they thought they knew and the decisive, brilliant leader I had become in secret. The true crux, the most important or main point of my story is not the $40 million valuation, but the quiet, internal decision to finally honor the worth they dismissed. When does our desire for a family's approval finally become secondary to the need for our own personal integrity? The arrival in Denver was not merely a change in geography, it was an ascension to a higher narrative plane, a shift from the muted colors of a constrained existence to the vibrant, full of energy and enthusiasm, neon buzz of a city that welcomed ambition. Ethan's presence in the station parking lot, his quiet, contained anger on my behalf, spoke volumes more than any celebratory speech. His question, "This is all you brought," wasn't about material possessions. It was a rhetorical query about the emotional toll of my departure. My forced laugh, "It's enough," was a verbal tic I was already beginning to shed, a final, reflexive attempt to downplay, to make something seem less important or significant, the emotional weight of my past. The drive through downtown Denver was a walking tour through my secret life, culminating in the breathtaking sight of the tower, our tower, a glass monument to relentless effort and shared vision. The structure, with its floors glowing like constellations, was a powerful symbol of what the writer F. Scott Fitzgerald called the capacity for wonder, a quality my family had tried to extinguish. They viewed the world through the narrow lens of their own conventional expectations, unable to comprehend, to grasp mentally, understand, the abstract, intangible value of cybersecurity innovation. For them, success was a safe, predictable job, not a $40 million seed planted in the fertile, capable of producing abundant vegetation or offspring, ground of risk and ingenuity. The surprise graduation party orchestrated by Ethan and the 40-person team was a pivotal scene, a perfect example of what rhetoricians call pathos, an appeal to emotion that completely bypassed the cold, rational detachment I had learned to master. Confetti cannons and a cake shaped like a computer chip are small details, but they represent a communal validation that had been conspicuously, in a clearly visible way, absent my entire life. "Thought it was time someone gave you the graduation you earned," Ethan's whispered line was a verbal gift, an acknowledgement that achievement is only truly meaningful when it is seen and celebrated by those who understand the effort. In the philosophy of Stoicism, there is the concept of prohairesis or moral purpose, the inner self that remains untouched by external circumstances. Standing on the balcony, looking out at the Denver skyline, I realized my family had only ever attempted to control the external circumstances of my life, my job, my address, my future, never realizing the inner fortress I was building. The belated, short, and cold text from my father, "Where are you staying? We need to talk," was a predictable attempt to reassert his dominion, a last gasp of control. The idiom, "to have a claim on someone," perfectly describes his mindset, the belief that the mere fact of biological relation grants him perpetual jurisdiction, the official power to make legal decisions and judgments over my choices. I didn't answer. That deliberate omission was a silent, powerful sentence, a testament to my newfound rhetorical power. My silence was louder than any argument I could have ever mounted in Seattle. It was the definitive proof that the shift inside me was complete. I was no longer a child seeking permission, but an adult choosing her peace. The literary device of dramatic irony saturates this entire phase. The audience, and I, know the colossal scale of my success, while my father believes he is still dealing with a directionless 27-year-old he successfully evicted. This gap in knowledge is the foundation of my growing strength. How do we learn to accept celebration and validate our own efforts when our entire life has been built on quiet self-sufficiency and emotional scarcity? The 2 days leading up to the Sentinel reveal event were an emotional and professional masterclass in navigating pressure, the kind of concentrated urgency, importance requiring swift action, that shapes leaders. The public-facing anxiety, the circling government agencies, the media requests, the high-stakes investor meetings was a welcome distraction from the silent, internal storm brewing from Seattle. My father's repeated texts and even Maya's were easily dismissed, filed away as the predictable fallout of an ego encountering an unexpected reality. However, my mother's call was different. It carried the weight of a long-suppressed, loving lament, a passionate expression of grief or sorrow. Hearing her fragile, breaking sobs, "Lena, are you safe?" was a sharp, unwelcome reminder of the complex, often paradoxical, seemingly absurd or self-contradictory, nature of love within a dysfunctional family structure. Her tears were not a weapon. Like my father's manufactured moods, they were the honest, devastating sound of a gentle soul who had lived too long under the aegis, the protection, backing, or support of a particular person or organization, of a powerful man. Her whispered concern, "Do you need money? I can." I have some saved, was an offering of genuine sacrifice, a secret act of rebellion against the rules of her marriage. This moment encapsulates a crucial philosophical teaching. True compassion often requires the quiet recognition of a person's limitations. My mother loved me, but she was fundamentally unable to break free. Asking her to stand up for me would have been asking the wind to hold its shape, a beautiful, impossible metaphor. My gentle, evasive answer, "I'm working, Mom," on something important, was a conscious ethical choice. She couldn't hold the truth of the $40 million company. It would only become another piece of ammunition for my father's control. My silence was an act of protection, not deceit. This internal conflict is a modern echo of the historical dilemma faced by individuals who outgrow their environments. The choice between brutal honesty, which can damage fragile relationships, and compassionate evasion, which maintains a necessary emotional distance. The tension, a strained state or relationship, snapped during the Sentinel reveal. The Denver Convention Hall, a colossal, echoing space, transformed into a stage for my public epiphany, a moment of sudden and great revelation or realization. As Ethan introduced me, the transition from a dark stage to the spotlight, with the LED screen declaring Lena Hart, co-founder and lead architect, was a powerful use of visual rhetoric. The applause was not just noise, it was a sound of professional respect, a reverence, deep and solemn respect, that replaced the cold, conditional approval I had chased for years. It was a tangible metric of my worth, validated not by blood, but by merit. The nonstop vibration of my phone immediately afterward was the sound of the Seattle facade cracking under the weight of national TV recognition. My father's message, "Come home immediately. We need to talk. We are still your family," uses the fallacy of appeal to tradition, the idea that something is right simply because it has always been done or because of an inherited structure. The core message I was finally ready to deliver was a decisive rejection of that fallacy. The dramatic confrontation in the lobby was the climactic final scene, a confrontation rooted not in anger, but in firm, resolute calm. My father's immediate assertion of ownership, "We raised you. You owe us," was met with my unwavering independent clause, "I don't owe you anything except the truth. And the truth is simple. I'm done being controlled." Maya's unexpected, shattering apology, "I was jealous. Dad always expected me to shine when you dimmed," was the one true, genuine moment of the exchange. It was a historical moment within our family, finally naming the unspoken script we had all been performing. Forgiveness is a complex emotional verb. It means accepting the past without allowing it to control the future. My mom's final, quiet, powerful intervention, "Frank, let her go. We haven't been a safe place for her in a long time," was her own personal, lifelong act of emancipation, the fact or process of being set free from legal, social, or political restrictions, liberation. She chose truth over loyalty to his control, a small whisper that carried the force of a tectonic shift. If forgiveness is an internal act of liberation, how do we practice it without allowing the forgiven person back into a position of power over us? The silence that followed the closure of the glass doors was not empty. It was a space filled with the profound sound of liberation, an emotional caesura, a break or pause in the long, arduous poem of my life. The physical departure of my family from the tower lobby symbolized the final, definitive end of their psychological hold. It was a clear, unambiguous statement. My emotional safety had supplanted their expectations. The weeks following the confrontation were an intense period of self-reconstruction, an intentional move into a life of authentic self-expression. Moving into the penthouse overlooking the Denver skyline was not an act of ostentation, pretentious and vulgar display, especially of wealth and luxury, intended to impress or attract notice. It was a symbolic ritual. The sunlight pouring across the floors each morning was, as I noted, a soft reminder that I had survived something heavy, a daily visual metaphor for clarity and transparency, replacing the cold shadows of the Seattle house. Crucially, I began therapy. This decision speaks to a modern, vital truth about emotional maturity. Healing is not something that happens passively. It is an active, dedicated pursuit. I sought therapy not because I was broken. The internal work on the company proved I was incredibly whole and capable, but because I was finally safe enough to unpack the psychological damage I had sustained. The process of unpacking those years, the ingrained habits of making myself small, is a deeper, more challenging form of coding than any work on Sentinel. It involves identifying and debugging the flawed self-schema, a long-lasting and stable set of memories that summarize a person's beliefs, experiences, and generalizations about the self, created during childhood. The company's continued growth, the securing of government contracts, and the surge of national attention became the objective correlative of my internal stability. External success became the mirror of internal peace. The letter from my mother, "I'm proud of the woman you chose to become," was perhaps the most valuable piece of correspondence I ever received. Its power lay in its use of the simple, potent verb, chose. She acknowledged my agency, the capacity of a person to act in any given environment, recognizing that my identity was a deliberate, willful creation, not a passive inheritance. It was a historical document marking the end of my quiet war and the beginning of a true, if distant, reconciliation. The act of placing that letter in a small wooden box on a balcony where the mountains fade into dusk is an elegant use of symbolism. The box acts as an emotional reliquary, storing the past in a sacred space, but never allowing it back into the active, governing present. It is a powerful philosophical teaching. Your past does not vanish, but you can strip it of its power to steer your life. The ultimate lesson I absorbed, and which has universal relevance for English learners and human beings alike, is this: to articulate your own worth is the most important lesson in self-expression. The idiom, "love without safety isn't love at all," is a powerful, concise maxim that becomes the governing principle of my new life. It reframed the entire decade, replacing guilt with clarity. Walking away wasn't a betrayal of family, it was an act of profound self-preservation and a radical declaration of self-love. My story, from the one-way ticket to the Denver skyline, is a testament to the fact that the most valuable journeys are the ones we are forced or dare to undertake alone, only to find our true community waiting at the end. The freedom I feel now is the true $40 million valuation, the priceless, unquantifiable worth of a fully realized self. I am Lena Hart, and my voice is no longer a whisper. In what ways do we continue to make ourselves small in our current lives, and what is the single, decisive action we can take this week to reclaim our full space, the continuous hum of the Denver machine, the relentless pursuit of innovation at Sentinel, served as a profound contrast to the stagnation, the state of not flowing or moving, lack of activity, growth, or change that characterized my home life in Seattle. My work, which involved the intricate architecture of national-scale security systems, was a constant lesson in the importance of integrity, the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, and redundancy. The inclusion of extra components, which are not strictly necessary for functioning, but provide an alternative in case of failure. Emotionally, I was now building a life with the same principles, an absolute integrity to my own truth and a redundancy of support systems that included Ethan, my colleagues, and my therapist. The philosophical teaching here is that the structures we build professionally often become the blueprints for our most important personal architecture. The concept of security work, which my father had so casually dismissed as nonsense, was, in fact, the most meaningful work of my life, both professionally and personally. Sentinel wasn't just code, it was a digital fortress built to protect the vulnerable, a direct extension of my lifelong need to feel secure. The $40 million valuation was an objective, verifiable piece of data that rendered my father's subjective, dismissive opinion obsolete. This is a crucial lesson in advanced English rhetoric. Sometimes, the most effective argument is one rooted in undeniable facts and figures, a powerful form of logos, the appeal to logic or reason, that silences emotional manipulation. My emotional development continued in quiet, profound ways. I started a journal, a physical space where I could practice expressive writing, a technique that forces the articulation of feelings long suppressed. I wrote about the pain of Maya's laughter, the crushing weight of my father's silence, and the almost unbearable lightness of my mother's secret love. This practice of putting words to internal conflict is a powerful metaphor for language learning itself. You cannot truly master a concept until you can clearly articulate its nuances and complexities. I learned the advanced vocabulary of my own emotions, dichotomy, a division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different, between my internal life and external presentation, vicarious, experienced in the imagination through the feelings or actions of another person, living through Maya's perfect existence, and the ineluctable, unable to be resisted or avoided, inescapable, need for self-determination. The historical context of my journey can be framed by the concept of the American dream, but twisted. My parents saw the dream as conformity and security, while I redefined it as a radical pursuit of one's authentic, intellectual self, regardless of familial cost. The one-way bus ticket became my symbol of the tabula rasa, an absence of preconceived ideas or predetermined goals, a clean slate, a voluntary blank space upon which I could finally, definitively, write my own story. My relationship with Ethan deepened into a partnership built on mutual respect and shared intellectual passion, a dynamic that showed me what healthy love and affirmation truly looked like. He never tried to fill the empty spaces left by my family. He simply affirmed the powerful, whole person who was already there. The finality of the confrontation with my family provided me with a clear, emotional baseline. My heart was steady during the exchange, my voice stronger than I expected, because I was speaking from a position of unassailable truth and financial independence. The real shock wasn't that they came back. That was a predictable response to my national TV appearance, a calculated move to reclaim their narrative. The shock was the truth they inadvertently brought with them, Maya's honest apology and my mother's act of rebellion. These small moments, like faint stars in a vast, dark sky, offered the first true promise of distant, future hope. But hope, I learned, cannot be the foundation of a life. That must be built on stone-cold, self-made certainty. If our actions are the truest form of communication, what hidden message is your current daily routine sending about your true priorities and aspiration? The phase of quiet rebuilding became my most productive. A period where the high-stakes professional life was deliberately balanced with a deep commitment to emotional and philosophical grounding. The penthouse, the company, the recognition, these were the glittering, external artifacts of my journey, but the true wealth was the internal shift from reaction to intention. My father's controlling love had forced me into a reactive stance, always planning an escape, always bracing for the next criticism, always making myself small. Now, every decision was rooted in a clear, conscious intention to nurture my happiness and growth. This is the ultimate lesson in personal governance, to move from being an object of others' intentions to the subject of your own. The ongoing work of therapy became an intellectual pursuit, a deep dive into the human sciences that complemented my technological expertise. I studied concepts like intergenerational trauma, a concept which holds that trauma can be transferred from the first generation of trauma survivors to the second and further generations of offspring, and the enmeshment, a concept from family therapy in which the boundaries between members are diffuse and unclear, of dysfunctional family systems. This provided the advanced vocabulary to finally articulate my past, moving my painful experiences from raw, confusing emotion to understandable, nameable psychological phenomena. Naming the pain was the first step toward disarming it. My mother's letter, kept in the small wooden box, became a daily meditative focus. The simple declarative sentence, "I'm proud of the woman you chose to become," was a perfect model of effective communication, direct, sincere, and focused on the recipient's agency. It taught me that genuine love, even if late, is always focused on who you are, not what you can do for the speaker. This is a universal wisdom applicable to all human relationships. The historical relevance of my story is tied to the concept of autonomy, the right or condition of self-government, the ongoing human struggle to define oneself outside of inherited titles and structures. Just as nations fight for political autonomy, I fought for personal autonomy. The one-way bus ticket was not just a symbol of rejection, it became my ticket to self-rule. The freedom I now felt was an absolute freedom, the capacity to act without external constraint, which the philosopher Immanuel Kant described as the ultimate moral good. In this state of freedom, I finally understood the profound link between English learning and universal wisdom. Clear, precise language is not just a tool for communication, it is the fundamental mechanism for self-definition and emotional boundary setting. When I told my father, "I'm done being controlled," the clarity of that sentence was the product of years of unspoken thought, condensed into a single, unassailable statement. My story, from the quiet terror of my childhood home to the dazzling height of the Denver skyline, is a testament to the quiet, powerful work that happens in the shadows, the late nights of coding, the early mornings of study, the silent accumulation of skills and capital that ultimately transform an object into a subject. The past, as I came to understand, is not a prison sentence. It is a curriculum. Every hardship was a lesson in resilience, every criticism a prompt to excel, and every moment of feeling small a fuel source for colossal ambition. The choice to walk away, to sever the toxic tie, was the final, most important breakthrough of my career, securing the integrity of the lead architect, not of Sentinel, but of my soul.